Hey, it's Thursday again, and I'm here this week. Last week, Mr. Wilson was with you, and today we're going to talk about finding grit through inspirational poetry. Last week, Mr. Wilson talked to you about the Oklahoma City bombing and how we as Oklahomans have always been resilient. That seems to be like a theme in my life last couple of days. Don't get me started. So, I mean, everything that I've ever read in the last couple of days, seen on TV or heard, even on the radio, it talks about how we're resilient. So that's why I thought that maybe this would be a good topic. Just a little background. So I became an English teacher because one day an English teacher said to me, I think you should write. She gave me a journal and said, this will help you. And that's how I fell in love with writing. And I found out that I was pretty good at it. I liked it. And that's how I became an English teacher. And every April, when it's National Poetry Month, kids go, oh, God, poetry. And I know some people don't like it, but there are some very good things in classical poetry that you can find, maybe connect with. And so I have some today that I want to share with you. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, this is one of my favorite quotes from Dead Poet Society, and Robin Williams does a fantastic job when he says this, but you might have heard it in some commercials, but he says, we don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion, and medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, and we're going to talk a lot more about Whitman. Whitman says, O me, O life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life? The answer is that you are here, life exists, and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. And then he asks the question, what will your verse be? So today we're going to talk about how you can contribute a verse. And that's about, if you've had me in 6th grade, we talk about effort all the time. So I have some essential questions, like the big idea, what are we doing here? When you're in middle school, high school, you start evolving, you start thinking for yourself, and you start realizing that, hey, life isn't all ice cream cones and, unicorns. So that's when, life just dumps on you, and you start to have these problems, and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with yourself. And people are asking you what you want to do, and in middle school, it's like, I don't know what I want to do. But when you get to high school, you kind of have to try to figure that out. And we all have big ideas. When I was in middle school, I wanted to be a ballet dancer. That obviously didn't happen. So number one, why is it important to have a dream? Number two, how do people achieve their dreams? 3, can a person achieve their dreams alone? And 4, what do you do once you have achieved your dreams? Now, if you're a Sequoyah kid, you can look online, and I have the whole PowerPoint for you. But you can also write these down if you're interested in answering them. They're good questions. You should ask yourself. I believe everyone should be asking themselves questions all the time, like, what do I want to do? How am I going to get there? And I think number 4 is important. What do you do once you get there? What do you do once you have achieved your dream? So, some vocabulary to think about. So I told you resilience seems to be the word of the year, actually. In the beginning of the school year, we talked about, as a faculty, how to find your grit, and what grit really was. So I thought that was important to go along with this, because that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what do you do when you have hard times, and how do you get past that, and how do you succeed, even though you may fall. So grit is the courage and resolve, strength of character. Synonyms for grit are endurance, perseverance, effort, determination, guts, and backbone. And so if you can see the screen, I've kind of like highlighted in different colors and underlined how they all seem similar. Perseverance, this is my word. This is our counselor asked us for our word, and so my word has always been perseverance. And it's sort of related to grit because it's grit and perseverance. It's resolve. It's a thing when you have a fall, when you mess up, you don't stay down. You get up. It's persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Maybe you don't get something today that you wanted. Maybe it's going to happen tomorrow. You never know. But if you stop in your efforts to attain what you want, then it'll never happen. Synonyms for perseverance: staying power. That means like, I'm here and I'm not going to quit. Determination, see, along with grit, that they have the same synonyms. And assiduity, I always thought that I would mess that word up. Here's the actual, there's a noun for that, assiduousness. It's the constant or close attention to what one is doing. It's sort of like having a goal and then making a plan to get there. Conscious, close attention to what one is doing. Synonyms for that are effort, industriousness, and doggedness. Oklahoma cattle dogs, how we have the cattle dogs, I think that's kind of where that word comes from. We see the cattle dogs and how they like herd the cattle. I think that's where that word comes from. Have that doggedness, how staying on something, despite anything that you've had go on in your life. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's toughness. Synonyms are durability and strength. So all of these words are sort of related. They could all be synonyms of each other. The main point is to achieve something that you want to achieve, you have to have these characteristics. Okay, so here's a poem by Langston Hughes, and we'll have another one in a second. It says, what happens to a dream deferred? Deferred. What does deferred mean? It means to put off. Now, you can think of deferred as put off indefinitely, put off for a short period of time. Let's just read the rest of the poem. So it says, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? What do you think that he is saying by this? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So if you're deferring your dreams, if your dreams are drying up, I would think that meant that it was going away. Or fester like a sore and then run. I'm going to combine these lines. Fester like a sore and then run. Maybe this means it's a wound, still there. Maybe it means it's a wound, it's still there. Does it stink like rotten meat and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? I don't even want to think about that one. That's disgusting to me. Stink like rotten meat. I can't even, no. That just reminds me of my refrigerator. If you've ever left anything in your refrigerator for too long, yeah, don't go looking in mine. This is why I don't eat my leftovers. Stink like rotten meat. Crust over like a syrupy sweet. To me, this and this sound the same because it sounds like, oh, I don't even want to say it, like a scab. Ugh. Rotten. I'll just take that one off there. Can a dream become rotten? How can a dream become rotten? Or maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So this one, right here, wound still there, sags like a heavy load. So maybe a dream deferred becomes a heavy load that you haven't dealt with. And if you've had me for English, you know my writing is atrocious. So if it becomes a heavy load, it means you haven't dealt with it. It means you haven't confronted it. It means you haven't taken action to get where you want to go. And sometimes if you leave things alone for too long, like the meat in the refrigerator, a sore that you haven't tended to, something left out in the sun that dries up, then does it mean that it's going away? Probably not. So sometimes dreams don't go away, especially, I'm on a leash, especially if you don't deal with this. That's par for the course for anything. If you let something go for so long and you don't deal with it, you're going to suffer repercussions. And it'll always be there. If you know, like we talked about Greek mythology in my last session with you guys, there's a guy that puts the world on his shoulders. His name is Atlas. He has to carry that burden the whole entire time. So your dreams, if they're deferred and put off, it becomes that burden that you haven't confronted and attempted. What would happen if you attempted it? Let me get out of here. All right. Okay. So good old Walt Whitman. Love Walt. He has a poem called Success, and so I'm gonna pick out some things in here. But what I want you to focus on is I want you to look for effort. So when we talk about grit and perseverance and resilience and assiduity, we're talking about persevering. We're talking about effort. It's like what you have to do to get where you want to go. And I don't know about anyone else, but poems have always spoke to me. And they might not speak to you because you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, all these metaphors, and some people take them very literally, but that's what I'm here for today. I'm going to help you not take it so literally. Okay, so this is one of Whitman's poem, Success. We have not wings, we cannot soar, but we have feet to scale and climb. By slow degrees, by more and more, the cloudy summits of our time, the mighty pyramids of stone that wedge, cleave the desert airs, when nearer seen and better known, are but gigantic flights of stairs. The distant mountains that uprear their solid bastions to the sky are crossed by pathways that appear as we to higher levels rise. The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in a night. So there's a few things in here that I want you to pay attention to. You might have already caught on to it, but Whitman is saying something very clear here to me. Anyone get it? He says, we have feet to scale and climb. And on the bottom, the last stanza, the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight. What does he mean by that? What? I think I can just put this in my pocket. What does he mean by that? Let's deal with the bottom stanza first. So we're looking for evidence of effort, persevering. How do you persevere? Right? Look at this last stanza. The heights by great men reached and kept, were not attained by sudden flight. And he says up here, we have not wings, we cannot soar. So that means that things that we want, Sometimes they're not instantaneous. We can't snap our fingers or just, beam me up, Scotty, and we're there. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that. We don't have wings. We cannot soar like a bird, but we have feet to scale and climb. Here's your effort. We have feet to scale and climb. That's your effort. That's your action that you have to put in. See, he says sometimes it comes by slow degrees, and then more and more. Sometimes you're third, and maybe you're right there and you haven't got it, but you have to keep going in order to get what you want. Slow degrees, and then by more and more. The mighty pyramids of stone. Now, if you're familiar with the pyramids in Egypt, those did not take a day to build. I don't know how long they took. I should look that up. But it wasn't overnight, guys. It was a long, perilous journey for those Egyptians to build those pyramids. So it wasn't something that they snapped their fingers and they were done. But it is one of the 7 wonders of the world. If you look up the 7 wonders of the world, the pyramids in Egypt are one of those. And it did not happen overnight. The mighty pyramids of stone that wedge-like cleave the desert airs, when nearer seen and better known, are but gigantic flights of stairs. What is stairs? What does that symbolize? What does that, like going upwards, right? Going upwards. So a person who is trying to achieve their dreams, they're going upwards. And we'll deal with that later. The distant mountains that uprear their solid bastions to the sky. All right, so the last stanza. The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight. And he says, okay, so these 2 lines. He says these guys, successful people, it didn't happen overnight, guys. They said while other people were working, right down here, but while their companions slept, their companions slept, while other people were resting on their laurels or whatever other people do, they were constantly working to get to the next thing. Constantly working. They didn't sit down on the flight of stairs. If I just hit this, will it go? Let's see. I'm talking to myself. Oh yay. Okay. So if you have had 6th grade English with me, and possibly you've dealt with this poem before, but mother to son, we deal with stairs in this. So let's read it. Well, I'll tell you, son, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time, I's been a-climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and going sometimes in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I still going, honey. I still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. What is she saying? If you've had me for 6th grade in English, we've went over this poem. So you know what she's saying. What is she saying? Life for me. She's giving her son advice. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. What is a crystal stair? Well, it's a staircase made of crystals. So does that seem like an easy life? Yes, this would represent an easy life. Crystal stair would represent an easy life. So she says, I haven't had it easy. Now let's look for things that were hardships and struggles. She said it had tacks in it, splinters, boards torn up, carpet, no carpet on the floor. Think of a staircase that's boards, no carpet, splinters, tacks. You have to avoid boards. So she's had a lot of obstacles in her life. Her obstacles to success. But she says, but all the time, I've been climbing on and reaching landings. So when you reach a landing on a staircase, it's like you get up one flight of stairs and then you have a nice little kind of break from climbing the stairs. But she's been reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark. So sometimes she had no idea going in the dark. She had no idea where she was going and what was going to happen to her. Where there ain't been no light. So if you think about that, you turn off your lights, try to operate in the dark. Sometimes you don't know what's ahead of you and where you're going to go, but you just keep going because you have hope. You have faith. So she says to her son, boy, don't you turn back. She says, so boy, because me? Because I. She says, if I can do it, you can do it too. And I'm going to have to agree with the speaker of this poem. If I can do it, you can do it too. Don't turn back. Don't you sit down on those steps. She says, if you rest too long where you are going to get comfortable. And then that's when it gets harder and harder to get back up and do what you wanted to do in the first place. You get complacent. That should be, well, I should put that word in there, but complacent. If you sit down on the stairs, you become complacent. You become okay with how things are. And I don't know about you guys, but that's not me. She says, she's still going. So I'm getting the sense that she's trying to encourage her son. Maybe he's having a hard time. She's trying to encourage him to keep going no matter what happens to him. Maybe he loses a job. Maybe he goes bankrupt. Maybe he has health problems. But don't stop. Don't become complacent. Get right back up. Well, we have an idiom. When you fall off the horse, you get right back up and you continue on. Okay, and this is the last poem that I want to talk about today. And the funny thing about this poem is when I actually was going to do last week's thing before I had a stroke, I had researched this poem, and it turns out that Timothy McVeigh used this poem before he was executed. And it just goes to show you that sometimes writers don't always intend the poems for what people use them for. Anthony McVeigh blew up a building. He killed 168 people. But that's not what this writer intended this poem for. The writer, William Henley, had MS. He had multiple sclerosis. I can't say it. Yeah. He had problems walking. He lost a daughter. So he wrote this poem saying, no matter what happens to me, guys, I am still the master of my fate. No matter what life has in store for me, I'm still the master of my fate. So I'm going to read this. This is really moving for me, especially if you play sports. It's like, yeah, yes. So it's called Invictus, which means victory. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. I didn't mean to mark that out. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So he is saying, I'm unconquerable. No matter what happens to me, no matter how straight the gate, that this is easy. This is that crystal stair. No matter how straight the gate, no matter how hard, this is hard. No matter how hard life is, no matter how easy or hard, I'm still in charge of my life. He says, I am the master and I am the captain of my soul. He says, it's up to me to put in that effort. It's up to me to have grit and endure. He says, effort, grit, endurance. He's got to persevere. He's got to persevere no matter what happens to him, guys. Circumstance. It's things that are beyond his control. So he says, no matter what happens to me, I'm the captain of my soul. Okay, so I'm being told that this is it, and I'm a bad ender. So, is it? Oh, okay. Well, I thought we were over. Okay. Okay, there we go. So I just want to leave you with this. No matter what happens to you guys, think about Plato, the allegory of the cave. If you know the allegory of the cave, these two guys are sitting in the cave and finally they're chained to rocks in the cave. One finally gets free and he goes out and he comes and he sees all this stuff that he's never seen or experienced before. And then he goes back into the cave and says to the guy, hey, I'm going to break you free and we can leave and be gone. And the guy says, no, I'm happy here. Sometimes when you fall off that horse and you become complacent, you also don't want to put in any effort. So you've got to put in effort to get where you go. It doesn't get any easier than that. And you're going to find as you get older, you go through middle school and high school, that you're going to have to put in effort, just like we all do. So I will see you next week. And Miss Dorsey is up next with some math. She's going to entertain us today because she is super spunky. So have a nice week, the rest of you. Have a nice weekend. Thanks.